welcome. I'm Tiffany Trader, Managing Editor of HPCwire, and joining me today is Jean-Marc Denis, Chief of Staff in the Innovation and Strategy Division at Atos Bull and Chair of the Board of the European Processor Initiative, EPI. Jean-Marc will be one of the featured speakers at ISC 2021, taking place virtually June 24th to July 2nd. Hi, Jean-Marc, welcome.
Hi, Tiffany. I'm very, very pleased to be with you today, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Wonderful. Can you start by briefly sharing about the nature of your work at Atos and also what your role as chair of the EPI involves?
Yes, for sure. So I'm Atos. I'm working in the R&D division, where I'm in charge of thinking about the future technologies we have to develop in the next 3 to 5 years. So in this role, I've been asked many years ago to think about a very, let's say, crazy and innovative project at European level, which was to think about having in Europe a microprocessor specifically designed for supercomputers. And this is how, when the European Commission launched the European Processor Initiative, I took the initiative in behalf of Atos to answer to the procurement, and then we've been selected. And this is how Atos became coordinator of the project, and I became the chair of the project.
And I believe EPI launched in 2018. Can you tell us about what are the high-level goals of EPI?
Yes, that's correct. We started the project at the end of 2018. And the overall objective of the project is in 2 different areas. At first, we have short-term objectives, which is to deliver to Euro HPC the microprocessors that should be in the European exascale supercomputers. So for that, we have to address the demand of one customer, Euro HPC, with a product, so with high rank TRL, so 6 to 9. And we have a second overall objective, which is to start developing in Europe our own intellectual property that will be based on RISC-V, in order that over the decade, before 2030, we could deliver to the European Union an HPC microprocessor 100% designed in Europe with European intellectual property inside. So that will be with low rank TRL. So one of the complexity of the project, this is to combine the short-term objectives with the long-term objectives.
What is the relationship between EPI and Euro HPC?
We are partners. We have signed in 2018, at the beginning of the year, a framework partnership agreement between the EPI consortium and, at that time, it was DG Connect, and now it's moved to Euro HPC. So we are partners working together toward a unique goal, which is to deliver to Europe European technology for supercomputers.
Okay, and can you talk about the expected timeline for development and readiness?
Oh, yes, for sure. So I mentioned for the short-term objective, the goal is to deliver an HPC microprocessor for the European exascale systems. So the timeline for the European exascale systems is not finalized yet. It's not announced yet, but it's going to be likely after the launch of all the pre-exascale systems that will be installed and put in production in 21, 22. So it's likely that the first European exascale supercomputer will be delivered by 2023, and the second one maybe 1 year later, or maybe 18 months later, something like that. So the goal for EPI is to have the first product ready to be delivered in volume in 2023.
And the Rhea ARM chip is a key component here. Could you what can you tell us about that?
Yes, this is definitively a key component because that will be the first, hopefully, the first success of European processor initiative, because the REA processor that is manufactured by Cyper, which is the industrial hand for EPI, is based on the ARM Neoverse V1 core. And this is the technology that will be in the European exascale supercomputers in 2023. But we don't only have this first microprocessor on our roadmap. Obviously, we are thinking for the next years with EPI about the second generation, and we start thinking also about the third generation beyond. But for the long-term objective we have set, having over the decade our own technology based on RISC-V, while we don't have products to announce yet, we already are testing our own technology in 22 nanometer on test chip, where we are going to prove that the key IPs that we are developing based on RISC-V can work. And we are announcing those days, and this is a press release made by Barcelona Supercomputing Center, that some of the key IP has been tapped out and will be available in the next months to prove the quality of the technology. And we have a lot of expectations for the next years around what we are doing on EPI, complementary with RISC-V in our first step, and then later on, we will slowly switch from ARM to RISC-V. But don't get me wrong, the fact that REA, the first microprocessor, is based on ARM Neoverse V1 doesn't mean there is no RISC-V inside. We already have many RISC-V elements and IP on the cores in the REA microprocessors. For instance, in REA, we have 29 RISC-V cores on the chip, not for computing, but for different components that we need for making the chip efficient and working well, for power management, for, let's say, traffic management, and so on and so forth. So we already have a smart combination of ARM technology with RISC-V technology. So this is why I don't think that when people claim there is some kind of opposition or fight between ARM and RISC-V, this is appropriate, because it's totally complementary, and the most efficient way to work is the one we have chosen. This is to combine both in the same developments and in the same products.
What are the next steps for EPI now?
The next big steps for us, this is obviously to prove with the RISC-V test chip that it works. And in the second step, this is to deliver the REA microprocessor on time for the European exascale supercomputers. So I would say this is very operational, very concrete. We are also preparing in parallel the second financial round of the European Processor Initiative. We are finalizing that with Euro HPC, and we will start the second financial round of EPI in November this year, with the second generation of general purpose processor, and with more complex RISC-V components, likely in accelerators.
Right. And as you work to achieve these big goals at the top of the supercomputing stack, how do these technologies and advances filter to the industry? Are the needs of commercial computing aligned with the needs of research and scientific computing, and in what ways?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because if we just develop for HPC, that will be, let's say, a fantastic technology showcase, but there will be no business consequence on the long term. HPC on its own is not large enough for developing a very complex microprocessor with the crazy cost for developing in 5 nanometers, on the future 2 nanometers, or even below. So we need to have a side market, more business-oriented, more volume-oriented, where we can produce very significant volume of microprocessors to make the economical model sustainable over time. So when we have launched EPI, we thought that autonomous vehicles, not only automotive, but autonomous vehicles, could be a great side market with millions of units. But over time, we are seeing the complexity for developing such devices in terms of security, in terms of safety, in terms of environmental constraints, of power consumption. And we observe that the edge market is growing, is not growing, is booming. It's becoming a massive market. So by chance, what we started to develop with the automotive and autonomous vehicle market can be reused almost with no change for the edge market, and more specifically for the infrastructure edge market and for data center. So now, for the next years, the focus in terms of business for volume will be much more on infrastructure edge and on data center.
So speaking about some of these trends here, what are some of the other big and interesting trends that you're seeing in HPC, and in what ways are they driving architectural changes?
Yeah. So this is my opinion. Obviously, I could be challenged on it. So at first, I believe that the era of monolithic machines, like the ones that we are going to see in the big labs in the US, is behind us. This is fantastic architecture and fantastic machines. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's monolithic in the sense that all compute nodes in the machine are the same. Okay, it's a heterogeneous inside the node with a CPU and an accelerator, likely a GPU. It's a SoC on its own, but the machine is really homogeneous. And I believe that with the evolution of high-performance computing, with the mix of classical HPC algorithms with artificial intelligence, so theoretical models combined with experimental models, so the equations with data, we are moving full speed to workflows and to data flows, because there will be more and more data coming from IoT, coming from edge, coming from edge. There will be also hybrid computing with in-house computing combined with cloud computing from AWS, from Microsoft Azure, and so on and so forth. So supercomputer operators have to combine all of them together. So should one SoC on one machine or one compute node address all needs? No way. I don't believe that at all. I believe that at first the European exascale machines and the future post-exascale machines will be modular. That will be a collection of different modules, each of them being homogeneous, but the machine as a whole will be a combination of totally different modules addressing the different stages or the different steps in the workflow or in the data flow. You could have a general purpose module with exclusively general purpose processors. You could have a module containing a CPU with a GPU, another one CPU with FPGA, yet another one with a CPU on a neuromorphic device, and yet another one with a quantum accelerator, and so on and so forth. So that will be very complex for supercomputer designers, on operators, on developers, on end users, because they will have to manage all the different accelerators on CPU. So if we want to reduce the complexity as a community, at least we can plug the different accelerators to only one CPU model. So the one that will be, let's say, the unification component for all the different accelerators. And I'm claiming that the best way to have a single CPU is not to consider an instruction set. This is to consider the architecture of the CPU. It has to be, let's say, a data hub, a massive data hub with many PCI Express, CXL lanes, with HBM, with DDR, and with a lot of flexibility to combine all of that together. Obviously, it has to address all the HPC applications that will never fit in accelerators. There are many algorithms. And we have the legacy from the past. We have many applications have been developed over the last 40 years, even more. So should we move all the applications, the tens of millions of lines of code to accelerators? I don't believe that. I believe that the CPU has to deliver good enough HPC performances, and that will be, and it has to drive, to pilot the many different accelerator classes we'll have in a modular architecture. So the global architecture will be modular. The CPU has to be a data integrator, a data orchestrator for the many different accelerators. And because it has to be hybrid, it has to be hybrid between in-house computing and cloud computing. I believe that the long-term direction will be toward ARM, because we see today the cloud operators moving to ARM. We see what AWS has done with Graviton2. We see Ampere that is becoming very important in cloud computing. We don't know what's going to be delivered by Microsoft, but maybe it could be with ARM as well. So ARM is becoming very important for cloud operators. And we also observe that in IoT, in edge computing, ARM is dominant. So to keep the complexity low and to have a seamless data flow from IoT to cloud on supercomputers, I believe that the best way to go, at least for the next 5 years, will be to go with ARM. And then what's beyond, I don't know. I hope it's going to be RISC-V, because we are doing a lot around RISC-V in Europe for the future, but no one can predict what will be the future beyond, let's say, 2026, 2027.
Mm-hmm. And what is your view of the role of the chiplet approach in the coming age of modularity that you envision? So where you connect together the different dies in the same package, what would you say are the main advantages of, or possibly limitations of that?
So I only see advantages, not many limitations. Maybe a few, but not so many, and they are very, let's say, marginal considering all the advantages. The very first advantage of using many different chiplets is at the silicon level. We can combine different manufacturing process. For, let's say, an IO die, you don't need to manufacture in 3 nanometers. While for an advanced compute die, delivering high frequency and lots of performance, going to 3 nanometers could make sense. So you can already do this is the first gain. Use the right manufacturing process for the right, let's say, feature in the CPU. You could play like with Lego, where you combine different dies, delivering different features. You package them together, and then boom, you've got a new product. Don't get me wrong, this is not something you can do over the night. It's expensive. It's a complex industrial process, from engineering to manufacturing, onto package, onto integration. That takes minimum 9 to 12 months. to make that chiplet integration together, but at least this is achievable, and the cost for doing that is marginal compared to the cost of delivering a totally new CPU for delivering a new feature. So you can address the complexity if you can anticipate long enough in advance your future need, at least 12 months. And you also need to have some significant volume for the specific component you want to develop using chiplets, because you need to absorb the cost of development of manufacturing. The one-fits-all approach doesn't fit with a multiple chiplet approach. So this is I only see advantages on that as long as there is an industrial market and volume behind. I also see that's a bit technical in terms of manufacturing process, lots of advantages in terms of yield in production. Because if you have many small chiplets, then the yield in production for the chiplet is improved for the die itself. Huh? So having a higher yield reduce the manufacturing cost. While if you have only a monolithic big chiplet, then the yield in production is reduced and the cost is much higher. So this is yet another advantage at the financial level to move to chiplets. Mm. And the drawback of chiplets, to address this question in a couple of seconds, is that obviously you need to have communication between the chiplet. So you need to develop specific protocol to connect chiplet to chiplet. So you could have a bit reduced bandwidth and a bit increased latency. So that could be the drawback of using multiple chiplets.
And we're already seeing the chiplet approach being taken to the next level, somewhat literally, right? Moving into the third dimension. There was news recently from AMD that they're announcing an approach starting with the vertical 3D cache that stacks on the top of the die. What do you think of that?
That's a big achievement to announce commercial products based on this technology. It's very innovative, and this is a direction where the whole industry is going to. So this is a first, let's say, first product that will be available. And I believe that we will all, I mean, when I say we, I mean the whole semiconductor industry, we will all move to this direction. So AMD has been very innovative in this area, for sure.
And your upcoming talk at ISC will be focusing on a lot of the topics we just discussed, with the transition from existing homogeneous to future modular architectures. That talk is the future supercomputers are game changers for processor architecture. Why? That'll be on Tuesday, June 29th. Jean-Marc Denis, EPI Chair, thank you so much for joining me today. We look forward to your ISC talk.
Thank you very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Take care. Take care, everyone.